From the city of broad shoulders, this is Chicago Unscripted with CBS News Chicago's Joe Donlan.
We are about 6 months into President Trump's second term, and the news cycle has been head-spinning, to no one's surprise, really. Trump ally Steve Bannon has said openly he believes in the flood the zone theory to overwhelm the opposition, and this administration has done just that. It's hard to keep up at times. If you like politics, imagine walking into a bar and sitting down next to my two guests, Lori Lightfoot, the former Chicago mayor, and Pat Brady, the former head of the Illinois Republican Party, both former prosecutors as well. Belly up, because that's what's ahead. I had them on the podcast the day after the 2024 election, and looking back at the analytics, it remains in the top 5 of all the episodes of Chicago Unscripted. So I thought it was time to have them back, and they do not disappoint with their observations and even some predictions at the end. It's important to point out we recorded this just before a very busy weekend, so there are some topical issues we didn't know about at the time, but we cover a lot of ground. You know where Mayor Lightfoot stands after tussling with Trump during her time in office. Brady is admittedly not a Trump fan, but still defends the old-school conservative values running through his veins. It's always fun to get these two together. This format allows them to let it rip, and they do. Here's Lori Lightfoot and Pat Brady. Great to see you both. I didn't know where to start here, but as we tape, Israel has just launched an attack against Iran, hitting 100 nuclear and military sites. So that seems like a good place to start, Mayor. Why now, and what does this mean for the region?
Well, I think it's got to be very concerning for everybody of goodwill who lives in the region. Israel obviously has a mighty military force, but so does Iran. And attacking Iran's so-called nuclear sites without giving any space for a negotiated resolution seems extraordinarily dangerous and foolhardy. But it also, I think, speaks a lot about Benjamin Netanyahu's beliefs about the current federal administration here. Unfortunately, I think that President Trump has given him broad latitude to basically do whatever he wants. And this is a dramatic escalation of tensions in the Middle East. And one has to wonder, from the Israeli population standpoint, what's this mean for them? Israel, again, has a lot of resources, but has been fighting, a couple year now war in Gaza, went to and fought against Hezbollah, now is opening up, in effect, a third front. The region is going to respond. So I'm concerned about what this means.
Pat, I would imagine President Trump is, if not secretly, openly happy about this, because he's said on a number of occasions he does not want Iran to have nukes. So it seems also like Iran has been sort of neutered in many ways between Hezbollah, somewhat to Hamas, and Syria. And the only thing really they kind of have left are the Houthis, who could come into play in this. Where are you on what's just happened and what it means?
Well, I agree with the mayor. It's scary when you see the headlines we saw this morning, and you see the videos, and you realize, these are people actually trying to live their lives in both these countries, and this is a horrible war. I think politically, and on the timing of it, the cynic in me says that Bibi Netanyahu realized, his government almost dissolved a couple days ago, that he has issues within his own caucus and he needed to do something. Now, President Trump's True Social post in the last 4 or 5 hours, for Trump, this is very risky. The last thing that the MAGA base wants is the United States involved in another Middle Eastern war or any war at all. So that he's a real risk there of alienating his base. But typical Trump, if you looked at the True Social, he basically threaded the needle by somewhat taking credit for the strikes that were successful by saying that the United States has the best military equipment in the world. So I'm kind of taking a deep breath to see if this escalates, to see what the retaliation is. But the big issue is going to be oil prices are going to cut off the Straits of Hormuz, and what's going to happen to the stock market went a little bit crazy, at least early in the day. So those are big questions I have, but I agree completely with the mayor. These are bad headlines to wake up to.
Well, it seems clear that whatever they had has been diminished, nuclear, capability-wise. I guess my sort of scary question is, do you think there's a chance, because no one's really been in there and no one knows, but is there a chance Iran's already there and they have this nuclear capability?
Look, I think there's a lot of speculation about that. I mean, what I've seen in writing in the TV commentary is it could be weeks away, they could be months away. I don't think truly anyone knows, for the reason that you said. Nobody's been in there on site to really see what the developments are. I think we can safely assume they haven't stopped. If anything, they've probably escalated their mission to get enough fissile materials to be able to make a bomb. But it also reminds me a little bit of the debate heading into the Iraq War, where the Iraqis have weapons of mass destruction. We have this evidence that nobody really knows. But that's the scary part, because we know they have the capabilities. We know they have the ambition. And it is a timing issue, but all the more reason to let the international authorities get in there and figure it out, and not blow up the deal as Trump did, or as now Israel has done, literally blow up supposed sites, because there's going to have to be a response. And we already saw this morning that Iran had launched a number of different drones that had gone over other Middle Eastern countries' territory. It is not a good situation. It needs to be de-escalated. And you would think that the president of the United States would be urging for calm, to take a pause, getting on the phone with Netanyahu and others in the region to de-escalate this potentially awful, catastrophic situation.
All right, let's move on to the immigration protests. We have a lot of ground to cover, so let's kind of chronologically attack these. As we tape this again, last night, a judge ruled President Trump's deployment of the National Guard was illegal and exceeded his statutory authority. Mayor, you actually went through this with the National Guard twice, as I recall. So what would you have done if you were mayor and President Trump sent the National Guard to Chicago like he did in L.A.?
I would have fought like Karen Bass and Governor Newsom are doing. Look, the thing that we learned...
You would have kicked his ass, Joe.
What he said. Look, I come to this discussion about the National Guard as a kid who grew up down the road from Kent State. I remember the reverberations. I was old enough to remember what happened when former Governor Rhodes sent in the National Guard to quell what was largely a peaceful protest by students and others. The National Guard is a military force. They are not a local policing force. When they perceive a threat, their training tells them they need to put down and repel the threat with lethal force. And that's the thing that, I went back and forth with the geniuses on my city council and others who kept saying to me over the summer of 2020, get the National Guard here, get the National Guard here. Well, all we need to do is look to, for example, what happened in Minneapolis when the National Guard took the lead in addressing the violent protest in that city. They killed someone. Similarly, in Louisville in the summer of 2020, when the National Guard came in and took the lead over the local police department, they ended up killing someone. Now, look, I'm not sitting here and saying that the National Guard are killers. Don't get me wrong about that. These are, men and women in our community who give great sacrifice and service to our country, but asking them to do something that is outside the scope of their training and their mission sets them up for failure. And then you add to that mix the Marines, who it's unclear to me that they've actually onboarded in the streets of LA or not, but it's a volatile situation. LAPD is the third largest police force in the country. LA sheriffs have a ton of resources, as do the surrounding sheriff's departments. And I'm assuming there's a mutual aid pact with those sheriff's departments in the surrounding areas and counties like Ventura County and others. And in addition to that, you've got the California State Police. You cannot tell me that there is not enough local policing resources, people who are trained in how to de-escalate, respect First Amendment protests, but also go after folks who are committing violent acts, vandalism, property damage, or other things. They know how to do this. They have enough resources on their own. There was no reason for President Trump, I think, to take the dubious step of sending in the National Guard without the authority and support of the California governor.
Yeah, all my police officer friends I talk to say the same thing the mayor just said. They're just, as much as we love the National Guard and the Marines, they're not trained for this. They're not law enforcement people. They're military people. And Mayor, I was thinking too, as you were just talking about Los Angeles. I lived in LA back in the day. It's not like here, right? I mean, LA, you could really isolate.
Yes.
I was out there during the riots in '92, and as bad as it was in the smoke, it was pretty isolated to one neighborhood versus here, where isolated still going to take in a lot of urban areas. So I don't, Trump doing what he did, politics of it are this, in the times in this country, going back to Lincoln, that they invoked the Insurrection Act to do this. The only way politically it's a win if people perceive it as being protecting property and persons. If it's seen as breaking up peaceful protests, it's a big political loser. Hoover did that. I think it was Rutherford B. Hayes did that. But the other times when it looks like you're protecting property and persons politically, it actually works out for you.
Pat, let's talk about why this is happening in the first place, these ICE raids. Like it or not, no one should be surprised it's happening. I mean, you and I were at the RNC in Milwaukee last summer, and there were signs everywhere that said mass deportation now. There are a lot of people in the Republican Party who voted for the president on this issue, you could argue, and they're all for this.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people that are independents and the Democrats that voted for it. And this is where, with the Democrats, Trump's doing what he said he was going to do, as much as I don't like the way he's doing it. And the border is a big issue. And there are people that fully support, maybe not necessarily the manner of the ICE raids, but the fact that we're shutting the border down. And I think that the Democrats' reaction here, not all Democrats, but a lot of them, reacting with protests and violence and things like that, just really feeds into Trump's narrative. I think if they'd sat back and tried to do something differently than calling for 168 protests, that just helps Trump with his base. And it doesn't really move the ball with the center. So just politically, I think the Democrats are in a tough spot. You can see even Gavin Newsom has tried to change the debate somewhat, unsuccessfully so far. But, Trump has got the Democrats politically right where he wants them on this issue, I think.
Mayor, let's talk about what Pat just mentioned there, because I do think some of the rub here is the way it's being done. It seems like a lot of it's happening almost in the dark, if you will, without due process in some cases. Are the people being deported here illegally?
So I think that's a complicated question, but let me push back a little bit on what Pat just said. What I think the people who voted for Trump on immigration voted for is Trump saying, we're going to get rid of the violent people. We're going to get rid of the murderers, the rapists, the this, the that list. What we've seen, frankly, is something completely different. And that's why I think recent polling suggests that he's actually losing ground on this issue. I'm not a big Gavin Newsom fan, but I caught a little bit of his press conference last night following the judge's decision. And by the way, I believe that the Ninth Circuit has at least temporarily stayed
they have.
That order.
So it's on hold, yeah.
Governor Newsom, I thought, talked with such passion that really resonated with me about, for example, a 12-year-old boy whose parents were picked up and gone. He doesn't have any siblings. He doesn't have any relatives here. So this 12-year-old boy, who I'm sure is horrifically traumatized, is wondering, what in the heck is he going to do? And who is going to help him? He's 12. And he talked about other stories like that. What it brought to me is my own experience here in Chicago in the summer of 2019, where I met so many young people that were at that time my young daughter's name, preteens, who lived in daily fear that if they left the house to go to summer camp, to go to a job, whatever, to hang out with their friends, that they were too going to come home to an empty house. So what we've seen happen, and I think it's solely to boost the numbers, because there just were never the kind of massive number of violent, dangerous criminals that were here without proper authorization. And I don't like to use the word illegal. The numbers weren't there. They were never there. And so what is happening is ICE, in order to boost its numbers, continue to feed the narrative that Trump spouted throughout the campaign and continues to, they're going into businesses. They're picking up day laborers, but they're also not only just picking up people who are not legally authorized to be here, overstayed their welcome. They're picking up people who were paroled into this country legally. The Venezuelans, the Cubans, the Afghanis, others. Those people had total legal authority to be here. And then not only are they picking up those people, they're sending them off to God knows where without any sense of due process. That is a clear violation of our Constitution and laws. And frankly, it's un-American. We are a country of immigrants. We are a city of immigrants.
For a lot of people, Pat, though, this is very simple. If you're here in the country illegally, that's where it starts and stops. Full, period. That's it. If you're here illegally, you're going to be targeted. That's sort of the sentiment I get from the right on this. And again, it was a big issue. But Pat, I wonder, too, when you see these things like ICE agents covering their faces, what does that say to you?
No, the whole process that this has been done, I think, it's mortifying to me. I agree with the mayor, the due process violations completely. But my point is on the politics of it. I think you said it well. People don't do the nuance like we're doing here. It generally shut the border down and arrest the illegals. They don't get the ICE detainer. They don't get what the mayor just laid out. Politically, I do agree there's been somewhat of a drop, but not a huge drop for Trump. People want that border shut down, and they've been effective messaging that. The flip side of that is, and this is where I think the Democrats are really in bad shape right now, they have no message on it. They have no message other than what the mayor just said, which is 100% accurate on the due process violations and is sickening, but it's not been tuned into a political message that's gotten any traction for them. They seem to be wandering around and, hey, shut the border down and get the illegals out. It was like during the last 2 weeks of the election, I was in Arizona, so I got to watch all the ads. So, of course, I sat and watched all the ads for hours. And your takeaway from it was Trump wants to shut down the border and reduce inflation, and Kamala Harris has a great resume. Again, this is sheer politics, not the propriety of what's going on. The Democrats just don't really have a good response yet.
Well, Mayor, maybe you will take a run at this. The ICE agents covering their faces. It does seem like a lot of this, people, you've heard, they're disappearing people. And again, I think to Pat's point, a lot of the people who have problems with this is not necessarily maybe how that it's happening, it's how it's happening.
Yeah. I think what the Democrats have to do, and you're starting to see a little bit of it, frankly, at the mayoral level, because the National Party has been in total disarray with this whole David Hogue nonsense. But I think what the Democrats have to do is humanize what's happening, because nobody signed up for, unless you are the most ardent MAGA person who frankly is probably racist, that doesn't care about the families and the rule of law, any of that. What the Democrats have to do is show, who are these people? Humanize them. Their moms, their dads, their kids, their American citizens, people who have been in here, this country without causing any problems, working hard, paying taxes, and are now being shipped out, right? If you can't humanize it, then I think you got a problem. And think about it this way. In the 1950s and 60s, when the civil rights movement, as we knew it then, was in its heyday, what were the tides that turned public opinion against the segregationists and the racists in the South? It was seeing those young people at those lunch counters enduring abuse and not responding. It was the Bull Connors of the world turning their hoses on those civil rights activists. It was the murders that frankly happened. But it was humanizing the struggle for rights. And I think what the Democrats have to do is learn from our collective history and start humanizing the people who are being disappeared Because most people, I think Pat's 100% right. The rule of law, democracy, it just doesn't resonate with them. But when you talk about, here is this 12-year-old boy who is now parentless because his parents got disappeared. Nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows if they're alive or dead. Is that really who we are as Americans? I think that will appeal to the vast majority of American voters, where they voted for shut down the borders, get rid of the violent, dangerous people. They didn't vote for that. But did Democrats get that right? Pat's right. I think Trump is winning.
Well, this is a much bigger picture question on this, but what is the answer to the immigration debate? Because I find it.
I think
really...
Mayor's running again. You hear that?
Let me be clear.
Yeah, get in line.
Up in 3 weeks, Joe.
No. I have not lost my mind in the last 2 years.
Well, I mean, I think, and we all are old enough to remember what happened when Ronald Reagan was president and the amnesty plan. And it just, I mean, we had the bipartisan bill under Biden that Trump shot down. We've been kicking this can down the road since Reagan. And I guess I'm frustrated that Congress can't seem to come up with a comprehensive immigration plan, because I think when you boil it down, as you two just have, we probably agree on a lot more things than people think. Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's got to be a comprehensive immigration plan. And keep in mind, the one that Trump poo-pooed because he didn't want Biden to have a win was one that was led by a conservative Republican senator who got his colleagues on board. It was headed to passage out of the Senate. No idea what would happen in the House. But, you know, we've got to, if we really care about this issue, and I think most Americans genuinely do, let's figure out a way to compromise. We know what the tools are. We know what the policies are. It's the politics always that gets in the way. And, you know, Trump is happy, right, that he's antagonizing the city of Los Angeles. He doesn't think those are his voters anyway. So what if it's chaos? So what if it costs $134 million in county to ramp up this ridiculous National Guard and Marine deal? There's no accountability or checks and balances anymore in the Congress, certainly not in the House. I hold a modicum of hope that some of the Republicans in the Senate are going to find their way, but he doesn't have any checks on him when it comes to the federal government. The courts are the only answer right now, and that's a mixed bag.
Now, Pat, you were close to John McCain, and I know this was an issue he cared a lot about as well. Again, it's a big question, but what do you think the answer is to this?
Well, McCain had a plan, I think with Senator Durbin, the Gang of Eight or whatever it was. And I remember traveling around with McCain and watching his campaign explode in 2008 on this issue. And the best line he used to say back then, he goes, for all the people that have been here working and undocumented, he goes, we don't have 16 million pair of handcuffs. You know, we got to figure out what to do with the people that are here versus doing what we're seeing now is just ICE raids and Kristi Noem flying around, you know, looking ridiculous, talking about arresting illegals. I agree with the mayor. I think the people of this country are fundamentally decent and don't like, if she said, if they can humanize these stories, then I think it sways public opinion. But right now it's just get rid of the illegals and they're winning on that. But again, the mayor just said this, there is a solution and there has been for a long time. It's just the politicians don't have the backbone to get it done.
And Joe, can I just add one other point that,
sure.
You know, as somebody who's a former prosecutor, and I am very proud of my law enforcement credentials, what is happening undermines local law enforcement exponentially. You have people running around with masks on, with no ID, just the word police. That gets interpreted and internalized in a certain way. And underscoring the reason why cities like Chicago should never allow its police department to participate in these kinds of raids. You cannot do that, be all masked up in black, in tactical gear, looking like you're going to parachute into, you know, a deadly circumstance, and then come back the very next day into those very same communities and try to be officer friendly. It doesn't work. So you are permanently harming law enforcement's efforts to build relationships with the community, have that legitimacy that's absolutely critical. Every study will tell you that. absolutely critical for law enforcement to be effective. They have to have the community on their side. This is destroying that opportunity.
Pat, Governor Pritzker was just in D.C. yesterday where he got peppered over Illinois' sanctuary laws. And I think there's a lot of confusion. And again, you talk about messaging. Those two words have become sort of inflammatory on both sides. But let me ask you, what does it mean to you, Pat, when you hear Chicago's a sanctuary city? What does that mean to you?
From the perspective of my political party, it means we're protecting illegal criminals and we're letting them live in the city and we're giving them benefits and we're giving them Medicaid and we're giving them a house and we're protecting them and we're interfering with federal law enforcement. And it's way more complicated and nuanced than that. But that's what I think the average Republican and center right or far right voter sees or believes.
So what does it mean to you, Mayor? Because Pat just said it perfectly. Critics think it means you're here illegally. We're going to take care of you. No worries. We'll protect you.
Well, here's the ironic part about that. You know, Chicago spends over $2 billion a year to support its police department, and spends, if you look at the entire criminal justice ecosystem, from the police departments to the county prosecutor, to the sheriff, to the jails, to the courts, this is a multi-billion-dollar operation, all focused on getting violent, dangerous people off the ground in our city and to return peace. So the notion that somehow we are just letting anything happen is a complete farce. It just doesn't happen. What that means, really emanating from the late, great Harold Washington, who first entered an executive order on Sanctuary City, it's respecting who we are from our origins, which is a city of immigrants, and respecting who we are in our present, and saying that we welcome immigrants to our shores. Of course, we want people to be here with proper authorization. But the reality is we have a lot of people that have been here for decades who came under different circumstances, may not have proper authorization. But if they are not committing violent crimes, if they are paying taxes, they are working, they are looking out for their families and their neighbors, we have a space that we're going to allow them to be here. The flip side of that is we cannot allow our police department to cooperate in these DHS and ICE raids, period, full stop, for the reasons that I said before. They're doing it in such a nasty, brutal, illegal way, which does not respect the rule of law. And that is just totally unacceptable. Obviously, if somebody is here who's overstayed their authorization, if somebody is here who's never sought the authorization, of course, they're at risk. They know that, and they're subject to deportation. But as my parents always taught me, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And what we're seeing play out in city after city across this country is the exact wrong way to accomplish a goal that many of us agree with, which is you have to be here legally. But give people the rule of law, give them due process. That's what our courts have said.
Pat, the thing I wonder about and get confused by is the argument that states should have control in certain issues where it makes sense to an argument on one side or another, whether it be abortion or whatever on the right. And for folks on the left, if you should give the states that kind of control and put it back on the states, why not put it back on the states on issues like this?
Well, probably because overall securing the border is a federal issue, and they haven't done it. And then,
well, so is abortion.
Come on, Pat. Come on, be honest here. States' rights can't be convenience when you want it to be, and then ignored when you don't want it to be.
Well, you're right.
And Joe, you're being nice, but the fact of the matter,
I think again, it just politically, you're right, and there are. I've made that argument on the true conservative position should be pro-choice, because we want you to be able to do what you want to do with your body. We shouldn't be telling women what to do, and I've been very vocal on that. But I do believe that this issue is a federal issue, and the federal government has failed us for decades in securing the border. And the Republicans, as much as I hate what they did, I hate it. They shipped people to places like Chicago and other places that claim to be sanctuary cities from the South, from the places where they're coming across the border, and said, okay, this is your problem. And now we are where we are. But to your point, yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy. There is no conservative party anymore. not my kind of conservative, not the Reagan McCain kind of conservative. We just don't exist. So there are a lot of inconsistencies in what MAGA stands for and what we traditionally stood for. Ronald Reagan could have given the same speech that Mayor Lightfoot just gave there on belief in immigrants. He used to always say the shining city on the hill, where he believed in American exceptionalism. Now it's more back to the 1930s. It's this America First agenda. It's if you don't look like me, you don't belong here. If you didn't come in the same way I did, you don't belong here. So it's a completely different discussion now.
All right, let's shift to the president's military parade. He's been dreaming about this since his first term. It didn't happen then, but now it's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know about you, but I picture this sort of Soviet-style parade with giant missiles, driving by, or Chinese troops doing the goose step, like Pat Brady walking out of a bar at 2 a.m. But,
dude, that's early.
Good point. What are we doing with this, Pat?
Can you imagine, though? This is what I see, Joe, too. He's going to look like Mussolini. He's got that look. He does that El Duce look.
Yeah, this is not something that we do in this country.
No.
Donald Trump obviously has dictator envy. He went to, I think, France on Bastille Day in his first term, and it was like, I want this. It's silly. And Bastille Day has a whole origin that is different than what he's planning tomorrow. Yeah, it's his birthday. Fine. Eat a cake. Shut up. Right? What we don't.
Well, it's the Army's birthday too, Mayor.
Say it again.
It's the Army's birthday too.
Fine, but there's a lot of
the Army doesn't want it either.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, it's a total distraction.
It's going to rip the streets up too, right?
We're going to be showing parts of our military that unless you're a spy, you don't get to see. Every one of our enemies is going to be taping this thing. They're going to be looking at our weaponry. I mean, it's just the expense for someone's vainglory. Thinking about the total lockdown on the city of Washington, D.C., the cost to the city for this, which the federal government is not going to reimburse them for. It's going to ruin the streets because that kind of heavy weaponry, which basically had to get shipped in by trains, the streets in D.C. are not equipped to handle that. It's going to be a disaster all the way around. To what end other than feeding Donald Trump's enormous ego and narcissism? We are the greatest military in the world, period, full stop. We don't need to do a parade to show it. And frankly, again, that's not what's happening on Bastille Day. It's honoring the war dead. It's making sure that people honor and respect the history of various conflicts that the French had been in. The French Foreign Legion guys were there. I actually was in Bastille Day, in France, in Paris at Bastille Day. Got to meet a lot of wonderful soldiers. This isn't what this is about at all. It's an abomination. It's not our history. And I hope this is one and done.
Too, you think about the presidents that we've had you look at Trump's 4 deferments during Vietnam. Can you imagine a guy like George H.W. Bush, who was a legitimate war hero, doing this? He wouldn't do this in a million years. One that's actually served and sacrificed.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's use that to transition to DOGE and Elon Musk. And look, I've said this. I'm all for taking a deep dive into the waste and bloat and fraud in government. It's long overdue, I think. But I guess, again, why would we do that and then spend $45 million on a parade and $100 million sending the National Guard into L.A.? Again, how it's being done is, I think, what bothers people, including the fact that while everyone's interested in, let's shave some of the debt down, but a guy on a stage with a chainsaw is not the way to do it. Mayor?
Well, I mean, where to begin with this nonsense? Everybody, every leader who cares about governance is constantly on the lookout for fraud, waste, and abuse. But first of all, you don't cut the people who are the overseers of making sure that government minds its P's and Q's when it comes to the way it uses precious taxpayer dollars. But what was one of the first things that these guys did? They cut the IGs. Why? Because they wanted to make sure there was zero pushback or oversight.
Well, I feel like, Pat, the effect of this is going to be delayed because we're already starting to see like people having trouble getting a hold of someone at the Social Security office. We're having issues with the IRS now where people are getting notices that they haven't paid when they have. In fact, where's Congress on this, Pat? Why not go through Congress? Republicans have all three chambers. Instead, these seem to be coming from the White House in the form of executive orders.
Yeah, well, that's the way Trump is governed. I think he's done 180 executive orders, which is like 5 times more than anybody's ever done. And this is all part of his kind of authoritarian power play. He doesn't want to govern. He wants that to be, and there's a long stream of conservative thought going back years on what the powers of the president should be. And if he's got power anywhere close to this, he's going to use it. But to the mayor's point, too, we're all against waste, fraud, and abuse, but there's a way to do it where you could actually go line by line and figure out what's wasteful, not what's not. But the way they did it, like you said, there's going to be pushback on it when the essential services aren't there. There's going to be pushback on it at the congressional level. And the old line, I think, is the truest in politics. It's pork if it's in the other guy's district. Mm-hmm. Once this starts getting to the ears of people in the House in particular, but I don't know what it's accomplished so far, at least on savings. It's minimal.
Right. Well, and he said, Musk said it was going to be
activated the Democratic base. Trump was interviewed, I think, in the Oval Office the other day. And he was talking about FEMA and what's going to happen, hurricane season, other natural disasters, which are only increasing, not decreasing. He said that's the state's responsibility. So let's do the states' rights. Let them do it, without the infrastructure and without the resources going to be necessary to help the small towns, the rural areas recover when there's a natural disaster. Fine, let the states do it if you give us some money that was previously designated to FEMA so you can build up the infrastructure to be able to do that. But it's just a thoughtless way of governance that doesn't see the real humanity in real people. And I've been telling my fellow Democrat-elect is the mantra that you need to use is real harms to real people. That's how you humanize it. That's how you have a message that will break through the noise.
This gets us to the big, beautiful bill, Pat. And again, back to the debt, because if we were serious about this, $40 trillion, the interest on the debt is now almost $1 trillion a year. It's more than we spend on defense. So if we were serious about this, how do we pass a bill that by independent estimates would increase the debt by, I don't know, I've heard anywhere from 3 to God knows how many trillion more, 5, 6. Somebody on MSNBC, for what it's worth, said 20 trillion more that it's going to add over the next 10 years. Does this bill pass as is?
Not as is, but I think it's going to pass. I think you saw some of the senators that were so opposed to it, like Ron Johnson, start to come back. It won't pass. The House version won't pass, but the Trump tax cuts will stay in. There's some other things in there on the solar energy cuts and other things I think that they'll dial back on. But to your point, there is no check now at all in Congress on spending. It used to be my party, which didn't do a great job either, but did better than the Democrats, I think, do traditionally on spending. And probably what the mayor's been saying all along, you need to show how this impacts real people. And that used to be the line was when the debt matches the GDP, that's when it becomes problematic and it crowds out money. But I don't know what the breaking point is to where this actually impacts people's day-to-day lives by 11% interest rates or government services not being provided. I mean, in Illinois, what the budget's gone from $40 billion to $55 billion. I don't know where the money's coming from, but we just have too much debt in this country, and nobody. Rand Paul's probably the only one talking about it. I know Wall Street people are starting to talk about it, but it is a serious problem. And to answer your question, Joe, neither side wants to deal with it.
Well, and it's not just Trump. I mean, every president going back to Clinton, I think, was the last one to have a balanced budget.
Clinton had a balanced budget, but Trump added more debt than any president in the history. He added more debt in his 4 years than Obama did in 8.
Right. My point is, though, that every president since Clinton has added trillions to the debt.
Yeah. Clinton had two balanced budgets. And the irony of that was a deal that George H.W. Bush and Dan Rostenkowski cut where we had the tax increases, which cost Bush the election. But the net effect was that we had a balanced budget. I'm not taking credit away from President Clinton, but that was truly a bipartisan thing to get things done. But heck, Joe, that was 32 years ago.
Mayor, let's go back to Elon. Because it seems this is the cycle we're in right now, because it seems like it was a couple of months ago, but it was just a week ago, I think, that this bromance imploded spectacularly in front of our eyes. I'm not sure there's any popcorn left in the country.
Well, look, there's truly something wrong with that guy, but he played Trump well. He bought his way, literally and figuratively, into the White House, by giving Trump what's $200 something million during the last election cycle to be the BFF, right? That totally appeals to Trump's nature. He is for sale. Make no bones about it. He is somebody who absolutely loves people who are obsequious, solicitous, whatever word you want to use. And Musk understood that. But this big, beautiful bill, so-called, really stands out. You've pointed out the fiscal issues, but the harm that it will do to shred our social safety net and leave states and localities reeling and trying to pick up the pieces of real people's lives that are going to be irreparably harmed. That's the thing that is so disturbing, so discouraging to me.
Elon went full scorched earth on the way out, too. I mean, there's some of the tweets that he put out, from saying that Trump wouldn't have been elected without him. And then the bombshell, and even that's what Elon called it, about Trump being in the Epstein files. He deleted that later, but he didn't hold back on the way out.
Here's the thing in the political environment, which is kind of more where my brain is most of the time. And just in the mayor's talking there for a minute, I wrote down 4 or 5 issues or things that have happened that would have been front page stories for months in any other environment but Trumpville. I mean, taking a plane, that jet, the Trump,
yeah.
I mean,
forgot about that.
There's a million things that happen that would have been front page investigations forever. But with Trump, there's so much white noise that the whole Elon thing, it was a week long. I mean, it was outrageous conduct what he did and the allegations he made. And this was Trump's guy. But there's no.
But like a true coward, this week he's
back. Yeah, he's back.
Said, maybe some of those things went too far.
It's not you, it's me. It's like a real breakup. But my point, there's so much nonsense going on. I mean, every week is a new huge story that I think a lot of people that don't do this for a living are just tuned out.
All right. Next up is the tariff war. Again, no one should be surprised because Trump said it out loud that it was his favorite word in the dictionary, tariff. I don't even know where we stand anymore, to be honest.
Who does?
I don't. All I know is every economic expert you hear thinks this is just a terrible idea. Now, whether Trump's using it as a negotiating tool, I don't know. But Pat, have we gained anything at the end of all of this?
Oh, absolutely not. We've blown our credibility on the world stage as being an actor that can be trusted. These countries aren't going to put up with Trump's nonsense. They don't need to go to the United States. They can cut their own trade deals. We had a trade deal with the Pacific Rim countries that he got. They killed. The whole tariff thing, particularly as a conservative, these are the things we fought against. I don't think we've gained one thing. This deal we supposedly signed 3 or 4 nights ago is not a deal at all. It's just a framework. China hasn't agreed to it, and it doesn't address the big issue with China, which is stealing our IP. So, I mean, I could go on for an hour on how stupid this is and how much damage it's done to the country. But Trump has had this in his noggin for decades that we're getting screwed and we need to have better trade deals. Yeah. Or do we get screwed a lot of places? Yeah, we do. There's a lot of places where the United States is treated unfairly, but you need to pick and choose your battles. And ideally, there'd be 0 tariffs on any country. It would all be free trade. But if you look at the history of tariffs in this country, going back to the early 1900s, it's never worked. Never worked. And it's a bad idea. And it's a big, fat tax. This is one where I think there's real storm clouds on the horizon for Trump, because none of this tariff nonsense is going to have an effect on the economy till probably in the fall. Because businesses are 6 months ahead. You're already starting to see the inflationary pressure. We haven't seen it yet, but probably in the next reports. And those ports, they were talking 2 or 3 months ago about stores order Halloween stuff in April, right? Well, they didn't make the orders. So we're going to have shortages. What shortage mean? Inflation. So I think that's going to be a real problem from him. And the reality is there are no deals. Nothing's been done. Even the UK thing, there's nothing been signed off on. So he's got 197 more countries to go.
Well, my question too is if we're going to try to increase steel production here, we want to increase manufacturing here. Great. But can we just cut a deal with Nippon to pump $14 billion into U.S. steel, but that's going to take time. And in the meantime, we're going to put a tariff on incoming steel and aluminum from Canada. How does that do anything but make things more expensive until we get ramped up to a point where we can manufacture more here?
Well, you said it. You said it exactly right. You can't just out of the clear blue sky create a steel plant in the United States. That's a years long process, way longer, frankly, than a presidential term. So maybe he's planting some seeds that will bear fruit years down the road, but it doesn't solve the immediate problem. It doesn't at all. Again, not a student of history, not a student of the economy. And meanwhile, prices are going to go through the roof. What's going to happen with cars in this country, right? With all the nonsense, they're going to be more and more expensive. And I think Pat's point about a 6-month lag is an important one. What's going to be on people's minds in 6 months plus the midterms? Good luck, Republicans.
The thing is not on that argument, and this is kind of my view on it. Our economy has changed for the better, and we cannot do manufacturing like we used to because our labor costs are higher. You know what? Good. We're paying our workers more. That's good for the country. I get the fact we have to be ready for a war and ready to mobilize, but we are a different economy now. We're a service economy. We're a tech economy. Manufacturers never coming back because our labor structure just doesn't support it, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. So Trump says this all the time, I'm bringing manufacturing back. It's just not coming back because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, there are certain kinds of manufacturing that are solid. And We've got a very good manufacturing base here in Chicago in the state of Illinois, but a wholesale abandonment of foreign plants that do manufacturing on a range of different products, it's not going to happen for the reasons that Pat said. Economically, it's not feasible.
All right, next issue is and again, it's another one, Pat, like as you mentioned that maybe you forgot about, but by the way, the president's revoking visas for international students, these attacks on universities across the country. And I'm not sure what Trump has against Harvard, Mayor, but as much as he complains about...
Probably because he couldn't get in.
Well, he got in.
I was going to go there too, but I couldn't get in.
As much as he complains about people weaponizing government, I mean, it seems like this is nothing other than an attempt to weaponize federal money, Mayor.
It is, again, he's sadly misinformed. Let me just say for the record, I wasn't at the Institute of Politics. I was at the Chan School of Public Health, teaching students who are going to go into all manner of healthcare and public health, and particularly a nice selection of international students who will take their Harvard education and go back to their home countries and hopefully do good. But, this is now a test of wills. Harvard is the most prestigious, esteemed university in the country, maybe in the world. And I say that as a diehard Michigan person. Harvard is special. It is different. And so you go after the biggest target. And what he expected was capitulation, like what happened shamefully with way too many law firms and other businesses. Harvard has the means to fight back, and they are. And God bless them for doing it, because what you've also seen is initially a lot of college presidents across the country of various sizes so scared to say anything. Now they have the space because of Harvard's fight to push back. You're seeing letters that are appearing of college presidents of all kinds saying, academic freedom, respect our governance of our universities. on and on and on. Now, that and 10 cents doesn't necessarily buy you a cup of coffee, but it's the silence that Trump and his people depend upon. And what you're seeing, market shift on all fronts since about mid-March, is people are finding their voice and they're pushing back. And our democracy is going to be stronger for that.
Yeah, I think, again, just the sheer politics of it. Harvard's an easy target for people in MAGA world and others that look at Harvard as nothing. And I don't mean this disrespectfully, again, because I couldn't get in, but it is viewed as elitist, and that's just a target that he's going to make. And I give him credit for pushing back. But there are issues with a university with $55 billion in endowment or whatever it is, getting tax breaks, some of the spending on some of the research. Are they spending it wisely? And not that, I'm not going to get to all the detail on that because I don't know it. But just politically, he picks targets that he thinks helps him, whether it makes sense or not. For the life of me, I don't know why we're debating this at all. But that's how Trump operates.
All right, let's get to the last issue here because I know we have to let you both go. But pardons and commutations. I'm assuming you guys both, as lawyers, have thoughts on this.
Both as prosecutors.
Well, sure, exactly. Which, it makes it even more germane. But Pat, and I know for you, this goes back to the 1,500 people he pardoned on day one who were involved in January 6th. But it seems like if you take a look at the exact cases you should just leave alone, those are the ones he's turning around.
Oh, yeah. How about another 2 words for you? Larry Hoover.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, dude, you know that.
I mean, I was a kid prosecutor in the mid-90s when Larry Hoover and his leadership were being prosecuted in federal court by a team led by Ron Safer.
Good guy.
And I was fascinated because I'd heard lots of stories about Larry Hoover, the gangster disciples, and the notion, and tried in front of a judge, Harry Leinenweber, may he rest in peace, who was a very straight arrow Republican husband of Lynn Martin, former Bush 1 cabinet secretary. But the notion that this guy, Larry Hoover, has now become this change man, give me a break. Let's look at the homicide rate in the 90s when the gangster disciples were the big dog in town. We were seeing 1,000 deaths a year in our city. And people who say, well, when Larry Hoover and Jeff Ford, we could talk to those guys. No, we could not. They were murderers. Larry Hoover probably has more dead black boys on his hands, their blood, than any other human in the history of the city of Chicago. And let's face it, when he was in IDOC, which he had been since the 70s, it did not deter him from running a massive, sprawling criminal enterprise right from prison. His lieutenants would come down to Vienna and other places and get their marching orders, right? The tapes that were used against Larry Hoover in that criminal trial, federal criminal trial, were tapes from the prison system that the FBI was able to tap into. Give me a break. But yet we see these Lilliputians, some of which are in the state legislature, who are pushing Pritzker. Oh, Larry Hoover's a changed man. He's a grandfather. He could be of such value on the street. No, he can't. If he wants to do something, do it from behind bars in prison. He should never, ever walk the street as a free man again. And I worry a little bit. People were having a debate on LinkedIn with some former prosecutors like, relax, he's got a 150-year state sentence. I don't know. This is a silly season. We've got a governor who's looking to change his address. What will the pressure bring to bear? I hope that it doesn't change one bit, that he's now going to be a prisoner in IDOC for the rest of his natural life.
Pat, you can make the case, certainly.
Hey, Joe, I knew that would get Mayor going.
Yeah,
sorry. You
Okay.
knew it. You knew you were triggering me. I feel very strongly about this.
Yeah, apparently. But Pat, you can say what you want about Trump not caring about the rule of law, but it's hard to argue. It's hard for him to argue that he does care about the rule of law, especially coming from 2 former prosecutors, when he sets aside the work of the judicial system and a jury of their peers who found them guilty, whether it's a reality TV couple or the sheriff, whether it's embezzlement or bribery or whatever. These are the cases he's deciding to turn around.
Yeah,
or the kid whose mother came and gave him $1 million.
Exactly.
That's the reality TV couple, I believe.
Okay. No, it's not the Chrisleys. This was a different one, circumstance. Yeah.
Oh, she's the one who spoke at the RNC, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Joe, there's no explanation, but again, there's so much outrageous stuff. Nobody's outraged. I am, I follow this. I'm like, I cannot believe the people that are getting pardoned. I mean, the history of pardons, that's not what the presidential power of pardon is supposed to be all about, but there needs to be some serious reforms in this country. And I mean, serious reforms on gerrymandering, on campaign finance, and on pardon power. And that should be, if I were running for president, those are the first three things I talk about, because those things, his ability to pardon Larry Hoover, these goofball televangelists or whatever they were, or reality show people, he's so abused the process, but he's not getting, there's no, what's the remedy, Mayor, there's nothing we can do.
There's nothing that can be done.
It's in the Constitution. There's nothing we can do.
You just got to hope that there's a state prosecution that follows the federal prosecution, which is a terrible, terrible thing to even imagine. Waste of resources.
And they're not equipped to do
federal
white collar cases.
System has been completely undermined by these pardons.
Oh, let's start there again, Joe. If we could have this discussion, Pam Bondi. I mean, she spends her whole day on Fox News. I've never seen an attorney general go on an opinion show like she does, and the things she says and does are frightening. And not alone the violent criminals and the game show hosts or whatever else he pardoned. What about the elected officials? I swear that Mike Madigan might end up getting a pardon out of this guy at some point. Who knows?
You never know.
You never know. Yeah, I mean, he mentioned that he might pardon Diddy if he's convicted. So we'll see. So let's end with a prediction. What you think could or might happen over the next, I don't know, week, month, 6 months? Mayor, let's start with you.
I will tell you, it's hard to know. But I think that Trump will continue to double down on a number of things that he's doing. I think that we will see federal immigration agents fan out to cities like Chicago and other Democratic-controlled cities. And I'm fearful of how combustible the situations will become. That's not much of a prediction because I think it's that saber has been rattled, but I'm very much concerned about it. I'll go, despite where things stand today. I think the Democrats are going to take back the House in the midterm elections. I think the Republicans are going to continue to overplay their hands. I think Democratic messaging will step up along the themes of real harm to real people. And in those 10 or so swing districts, I think that's going to resonate. And the Republicans there are going to lose. And they're going to lose by voting for things that are going to be extraordinarily harmful to their constituents. And this supposed big, beautiful bill, I know that there's an effort being made to deconstruct that and tie the worst provisions of it to the Republicans who supported it. And I think they're going to rue the day.
Well, one thing for certain is I'm getting a double Tito's martini at 5:30 today.
That's every day, Pat. That's not a prediction.
Here's my.
That's not a prediction. That's a way of life.
That's very well put. My only prediction was I do believe that the Democrats are going to win back the House. I do believe they will get their sea legs and start getting some messaging. And I believe that we will probably see the end of Trumpism as we know it today when that happens, because he's going to be lame duck. People are going to be scurrying and trying to figure out what's next. And there's not people, I don't believe, in the Republican Party. They're cult-like tied to anybody else like they were tied to Trump. I don't see a lot of people running up Capitol Hill with J.D. Vance flags. I think that the cult of Trump, he's going to be 81 years old. Again, this could all change depending on a lot of things the mayor mentioned, but I do believe that we've only got about 12 more months of Trumpism as it stands today.
We will leave it there. We covered a lot of ground. Good grief. Mayor, Pat, it's always great to have you both, and thank you very much for the time.
You guys at Valaria at 5:30.
Have mine ready.
I will get you going a double or single?
Old fashioned with rye.
Oh, wow. Old fashioned.
All right. Thanks again, guys.
The cherry.
Thanks, Mayor. Good to see you. Thanks,
Good
Joe.
to see you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye now.
My thanks to the mayor and Pat. There's no denying your interest in their analysis. I see the numbers. There's a reason their election episode was so popular, and I'm sure this one will be no different. The plan is to have them back every now and then to chop up what's happening in politics. My thanks to Brian Griggs with Brian Griggs Productions. He's our audio engineer. Chicago vibraphonist Thaddeus Tukes came up with the original theme music. And my thanks to Bill Curtis, who was kind enough to lend his legendary voice to the introduction. I'm Joe Donlin. I'll see you on CBS News Chicago. It's available everywhere on the CBS News app. And as always, I thank you for listening to Chicago Unscripted.